Welcome to Covering Our Bases. From Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. Now, as we cover our bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who just doesn't have the time to follow the other 29 teams in the league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry of Major League Baseball to be presented at all times as well. I am Dubs Brizzles, Warren Sprague. That's my buddy Dastardly Dan Harrow. And Dan, our NL West discussion was recorded literally 30 minutes shy of some pretty important updates because Matt Chapman has joined the Giants with a guaranteed $54 million contract over the next 3 years. Does this move their needle? Have we made a mistake? Are the Giants truly now a playoff lock in your mind? I know you had a little bit more stock behind them than I did. What do you feel, dude? Where does this put the Giants?
Yeah, man. First of all, just way to go to us to jump on this story a full week after it happens. I mean, just absolute impeccable timing on our part. But you're right. The Giants were, I was pretty favorable to them. I kind of liked the team that they had. And obviously, it's a pretty tough division that they need to compete in. But I thought that they had a pretty good team, that they made some right moves and definitely took a little bit of risk. But we talked a lot about how they didn't get that big free agent, that they were kind of missing on a one more name to really help them be as competitive as we know that they can be. And Matt Chapman is the guy. You know, we talked a little bit about Boris and the big four clients that were still out there. And Chapman was the first one. I shouldn't say the first one. Cody Bellinger was the first one to go, and Matt Chapman followed not long after that. So Chapman slots in immediately at third base for the Giants. Kind of helps them by pushing J.D. Davis out of their starting third baseman position and from coming off the bench. It's going to help them defensively. Obviously, Chapman's a Gold Glover. That's not necessarily a weakness that the Giants have had, but overall, he's definitely going to help their chances. A little bit more consistency. Chapman is good for double-digit home runs as well. We also talked about how the Giants have lacked hitting 30 home runs by a single player for the last 20 years. So Chapman is not going to be necessarily a 30 home run hitter, but he will hopefully help them in the home run category, which they definitely needed.
Yeah, San Francisco picked up a trio of sluggers if you add Tom Murphy, knowing quite well what he can do with a bat in his hand. So there's more power out of San Francisco than maybe we even highlighted last week, but especially with Matt Chapman off the table and into the Giants dugout at long last. So yeah, I feel like that's a pretty key move, and it does help show which of the two teams, I was waffling around San Diego being the one I wanted to favor. It shows which of the two teams is more ready to win right now, or at least more willing to invest in the winning. I think last week you and I chatted a tad that maybe it would be Blake Snell who would be the big fat signing who goes to the Giants, and guess what, man? It is still sort of kind of a possibility. They could still choose to pay him, and all of a sudden San Francisco looks like a real contender, even in such a tough division. So kudos to Matt Chapman finding his way to San Francisco, and kudos to San Francisco for finding a place for him. I know he reunites with the general manager he's super excited to play with again, so it's a cool story. Let's see if it actually pays off in the standings and with some run crushing opportunities. Good stuff, but that was the West, and the West is done. Okay, the National League West is done. Today, we flip over to the other conference of baseball, the one which is more of my home conference, friend. I feel like the weather is nicer outside, knowing that now we discuss the American League East today, the first of our 3 divisions to break down. And how about a fun division? Another one that has potentially 4 different playoff teams. And you know what? According to who you listen to, any of these teams can make the playoffs. And we'll talk about why or why not today. And Dan, I'm pretty sure coming into this that I know where my teams stand. Okay, I'm pretty sure I know which teams top to bottom. I'm wondering how you might be able to convince me otherwise, or if this is one of those rare occasions where we're going to agree step by step. I'm excited, dude. This is a great group of teams. What are your initial thoughts on the AL East before we dive into our first dissection?
So the AL East for me has always been a division dominated by either Boston or the Yankees, as far as I've been aware of them. And I have not been super aware of the AL. Like you mentioned, I'm a Met fan. I watch the Mets. I watch all the national teams. Interleague play introduced in recent years, but the fact is, I just grew up watching way more of the National League, including in the playoffs. So, yeah, I'm a much less. I have much less of a historical background on a lot of these teams, so that's an area that you definitely are going to be able to speak to a little bit more than I am. I'm also coming in, with a lot of these players just from where I've seen them for other teams, and usually if they played on a National League team, that's where a lot of my knowledge comes from. So I would say that I'm coming in with probably a fresher perspective of these teams. No recency bias is poisoning me here. I think that if anything, we'll probably agree more than we disagree, but I would be happy to hear you put me in my place if I say something out of line.
Ooh, and there might be some things you'll say out of line depending on where these wild cards will fall with you. I know that we'll wait all the way to the AL West, maybe a couple weeks from now, to hear about how we feel about my Mariners. But you better believe I've got some of my wild cards in my back pocket. We'll just put it that way. This week, though, let's jump straight into a collection of teams that some of them have worked really hard this offseason. Of course, the Yankees are back. In so many of our discussions, we've talked about that. We'll talk about why the Yankees are back later on in our chat. But first, let's talk about a team that's just trying to get back in a different way. This team, the Toronto Blue Jays, that is one that, well, has made the playoffs the last 2 seasons and has not had a very happy story in any of them, despite having some of the most exciting players in baseball. When you look at the fact that they're loaded with so many legacy players, right? Your Calvin Bigios are just the start. You've got your Bo Bichette, and you've got your, Vlad Guerrero Jr., baby. This team should be and has been circled to be the team to beat in this division, theoretically, for a couple of years. But man, they just can't seem to get over the hump. Former team that held Matt Carpenter, who went over to the St. Louis Cardinals along with a lot of talent. They also picked up a lot of pieces over the offseason to try to fill some holes. Talk to us, Dan. I know I let in enough. What in your fledgling fandom of the American League, what are you seeing and reading about these Toronto Blue Jays?
Yeah, so the big thing with Toronto is the either missing the playoffs or just the lack of winning around in the playoffs. They're 0-6 over the last 4 years in the playoffs, and they've definitely been known as a power team in years past. Vladdy's been the driving force behind that. Home run derby champion, Vlad Guerrero Jr. Only 25 years old, by the way, Vladdy.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah. So many years left to be the beast, and I'm sure it's not, I don't think he's done growing, you know what I mean, is what I really want to say.
Yeah, he's like entering his prime, if anything, right now. So definitely, obviously, Vladdy signed a 1-year arbitration contract. They're not discussing anything further at this point. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but I'm sure Toronto wants to lock him up. We'll see what happens. His performance this season will definitely dictate that. The story right now is Vladdy's teams over the last several years not being able to make that push in the playoffs. So that's what it's all about. And I think it looks like, to me, the Blue Jays have decided to sacrifice a little bit of power to get some more consistency, to increase the on-base percentage, to get some more defensive liabilities out of their infield and outfield. They've made some decisions. They brought in some guys that can help them with that. A couple minor league signings, some sluggers like Daniel Vogelback they threw in there just to see, and some utility depth in Eduardo Escobar. So it seems like they're trying to be smart about this. It's already a tough enough division to compete in. At this point, I see the Blue Jays as improving. Before I dig in a little bit deeper, Warren, I'm curious, do you see them the same way, projecting upward or slipping downward?
So thanks for that. Yeah, when I look at what they've lost and what they've added to replace, part of me in my gut says that this team took a step backwards, just a smidge, with whom they are putting in place to fill some voids. Matt Chapman replaced by a Daniel Vogelback. I mean, as the, let's say, the power of the lineup. You know what I mean? Whit Merrifield, right, is out. Great speedy and contact-oriented hitter. He is replaced by an Eduardo Escobar, let's say, who has a few more, miles on the wheels and isn't quite, I don't know, as prolific on base in my mind as Whit Merrifield can be. Brandon Belt is out, and instead Justin Turner, you could argue, another veteran who has been around some of the biggest teams, right, in the league the last couple of years, but trying to find yet another home. I think he was a Philly last year, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm probably mistaken. I'm trying to remember. I'm getting my MLB The Show season mixed up with real life baseball, which can happen when you play as much MLB The Show as I do. And it's just overall the pieces they've lost, if you don't mind me saying what I'm trying to say, is that they've put in guys that just don't quite have the oomph or the shine that some of these other guys do. I mean, I'm waiting for Justin Turner to be prepared to retire. He's pushing 40, and that's not a bad thing because the man still plays out of his mind. But at some point, luck runs out and things stop. So I don't know. That's what I read about whom they thought would fill some of these voids. And to me, you really are relying on outside depth. I think you've kind of shared with me that there's about 6 to 7 bottom of the top 100 prospects coming up in Toronto that may help fill out their bench and may help contribute here. But what they're doing is they're adding all these veterans, hoping the veterans remember how to play baseball well enough. And if not, they're going to bring in these young kids and hope even more so that they can learn. And that's not the state of mind I feel is ideal for a team that wants to return to the playoffs. But when you look at the legacies they have across their lineup, it's certainly possible that they'll succeed. So it's one of the more fascinating teams we'll talk about throughout the American League. I will tell you that I'll be watching Toronto fiercely because there's a budding rivalry here in a way ever since we did defeat Toronto in the playoffs 2 years ago. I'm speaking we as in Seattle. And I know that it could very well be one or the other of these teams that are a playoff team. So I'm watching Toronto extremely closely. You said you had more to dig in with, though.
Yeah, well, you touched on a lot of it excellently there. So Justin Turner, like you said, pushing 40, 39 years old. Turner played for Boston last year.
There it is.
And
thank you
at
for
39
everybody
years
who will
old.
let that go.
And dude, at 39 years old for Boston, Turner played a majority of the time at DH, but he had several double-digit starts at first, second, and third. At his age 38 season. So I fully expect the Jays to have Turner in more than just the DH role. Vladdy should be your first baseman every single day. He has been in the DH before. I see parallels of the situation with Pete Alonso in the Mets. Honestly, so a player that is an excellent DH, but has the ability to be an excellent first baseman if given the opportunity. So similar to what the Mets are doing with Alonso, I can very much see Blue Jays trying to hope that Vladdy earns and wins and retains the first baseman starting job. If he can, your question marks are really at second and third. You have Escobar coming off the bench. You want Biggio to really lock down second, but Turner is someone who could step into second, get someone else in that DH spot.
Good point.
Someone else that actually we had just heard signed today is Joey Votto, 40 years old. You thought Justin Turner was pushing. Joey Votto's 40 years old, dude, and he only plays first base. I mean, obviously he'll be DHing as well, but I mean, is this going to be like Votto and Turner going back and forth for the DH position? Like,
Fun story, that Joey Votto is going to play for these Toronto Blue Jays because, it's his hometown team, and it's a great nominee to be his retirement year. And I challenge, of course, the Seattle fan in me who wants to see them rise above a Toronto Blue Jays team. I challenge that could bring a little bit of that Adam Wainwright culture that we had last year in St. Louis, where it's like, goodbye, great player of Canadian descent. We sure do appreciate you, even though you've been with us just this season and may or may not do much to be productive. Thank you for being here over and over again. And in that case, that's going to totally drag down some of the let's win with aggression vibes. So super depth is here, right? There's so much depth theoretically. It's just finding whether it's the veterans or the youth that turn out to be the better choice. And that's a lot of messing with lineups. A lot of messing with lineups. I don't know about you. I know Seattle messes with their lineups a lot, so I may be shooting myself in the foot. But I hear fans cry out like, stop messing with the order and help them build some consistency from 1 to 9. What's your thought while we're on that topic where depth is almost unhelpful, where you just have guys moving so much, do they ever establish consistency? Is that a major factor to you?
It's an issue, yeah, especially for a player like that doesn't necessarily have a lockdown position. I mean, they're struggling to get times at bat, and then every other day they're either at first or now they're at short or they're at second
Mm-hmm.
base. And then if they don't do well at second base, then they're all of a sudden they're DHing, and now they're not even getting a chance to play in the field. So then they're thrown back out into it.
Yes.
And you're in the major league, so it's your job to be ready for these situations. But some of these younger guys struggle with a lot of these situations. It's a lot harder to give the younger guys the full on confidence because, like we've seen many times, guys go into slumps, and sometimes the younger guy you got to send him down to AAA, get him some meatballs to hit at for a little while, get his
Uh-huh.
confidence up, and then give him another shot and see what he can do. So it definitely goes back and forth. The veteran experience, you tolerate that a lot less. Joey Votto, I know him as a relatively streaky player, so if he's going to fight for at bats in this roster, we just talked about everybody else that is coming just through their 1 through 9, and with David Schneider coming off the bench, Santiago Espinal, Danny Jansen, and now Joey
Yeah.
Votto. In addition to that, it's going to be a competition, and injuries happen, and you don't want to plan on those. That will fill out some of these spots, but this absolutely could have some negative effects. The Blue Jays have, like you mentioned, 6 to 7 players in the bottom 50 of the top 100. Not a very prosperous system, but it is deep. These guys are all going to need playing time, and this does put up roadblocks for them. The Blue Jays are more concerned about winning now, and maybe they look at some of these players as needing time to develop. They're not going to help them win right now. And maybe some
Mm-hmm.
of these players might even be trade chips down the line if the Blue Jays find themselves in the position. You mentioned this very much appears to be a team that will be fighting for a wild card spot, possibly with Seattle. Yeah, we'll come down to it and see how much they really value their youth, or if they're going to really lean towards the veterans to lead them back to the postseason.
Right, man. And you read this lineup up and down. Springer, Bichette, Guerrero Jr., Turner, Kiermaier, Kirk. Don't forget Alejandro Kirk, right? All-star catcher. Dalton Varsho, young and up and coming, and certainly strong. I love Varsho on a couple of my digital teams, to say the least. Isaiah Kiner Falefa's on this team now, and Kevin Biggio maybe make up the weaker end of the lineup, but those are still two household names, at least to me, right? And Biggio is a legacy, which it tickles the earbuds to hear a Biggio
BGO.
on the field. Yeah,
It's just great
um,
to have one in the league.
right. That's your lineup, and then you said it yourself: Jansen, Votto, Espinal, and Schneider. I mean, a pretty strong bench. This is not a team that is devoid of weapons. What they're maybe more concerned about, and is almost more important, is their identity. It's their identity. Always ready to trade out veterans for new ones. Always ready to decide whether their legacies really fit their names, right? Like, this is a team that is in a prove it year as a camp, as an organization. It's exciting if you want to watch Toronto play with passion. It's scary as hell if you're an opponent of them, but also if you're in the lineup. So I love how in limbo this team can be. So much can happen for them and so much can't. And historically, they've fallen on the can't side. No offense, Toronto fans. So I want to put this team higher up, but they're kind of right in the middle of my projections because this team could take advantage if one of the teams closer to the top of our predictions falters. And they can also be one that completely fails to get out of the gate. It seems a little less likely that that would be the case, but man, I'm stoked to try to compete with Toronto this year. They're going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and I think the thing that will really ignite them is if Vladdy and Bo lead the offense. We've seen
Yeah.
flashes of it in the past. They need to lead the offense, and if they don't, then it's hard to imagine them really succeeding without those guys. But Warren, we haven't even talked about the pitching on this
I
team.
was just about to go there. Yeah.
They're really good staff last year, above average. They did
Yeah.
really well, and they return a lot of the same guys. Got Bassett, Gaussman, Barrios, Kikuchi, and yes, Alex Manoah is on the major league roster. He's on the 40 man.
Mhm.
Yes, he is dealing with arm fatigue right now. So is Kevin Gaussman, which is very not good. It's going to stretch them and get a
Yeah.
couple of their younger guys in. So Bowden France, Warren, is a guy right now who came out of the bullpen last year, sub-2 ERA out of the bullpen. He's going to get a chance to start. There is...
Yeah, until he gets a little healthier. They do have one of my favorite relievers in the league, Eric Swanson, a former Mariner who pitches well. But yes, Kevin Gaussman being a little under the weather to start things is definitely detrimental to a rotation that also benefits from Chris Bassett. I mean, Chris Bassett's a fantastic vet and arguably still the best pitcher in this group, pound for pound. And another former Mariner, Kikuchi, is in this rotation too, and he's as hit or miss as anybody as far as getting through a day unscathed versus not getting through the day at all. So it really can be quite a question mark there, and that may be where the team figures out how sturdy their wheels are to begin with, right? If you can't pitch, it doesn't matter how many runs you score. To an extent, obviously, you can crush 20 and probably win most games. But if who says Toronto is going to crush 20 a game? They're closer to a team that could probably do 5 or 6, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, can they pitch around their opponents doing the same? And that is truly up in the air at the moment.
Yeah, we should also mention Yariel Rodriguez. He will probably battle with Francis for that starting spot coming over from Japan. Haven't seen him in the bigs before, but he's projected to be a strikeout per inning at least kind of guy. So that could be a kind of under the radar name that we end up seeing leading that team.
Yes, but they, still have a decent closer in Jordan Romano and somebody I would be intimidated to have to face in those late innings. It's a pretty interesting team, man. One of the true wild cards in the American League because it's just you're going to be splitting hairs to see how they go any one way any given day. They're so much fun. They're really one of the funnest teams to watch just because anything can happen. Grab your popcorn if you choose to log in and check out a Toronto Blue Jays game this season.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to be exciting baseball, no doubt about it. And I mean, it may also be if they don't do well, and let's hope it doesn't come to this, but if things don't go great, Bichette and Vladdy are not signed past 2025. So if they don't show that they're going to be a key part of this team moving forward, this franchise will absolutely move on for them, try and recoup some assets, and it could be a very different Jays team in a couple years if they don't show some progress this year. So yeah, it's going to be a tough climb, especially with some of the other teams in the division, which we'll talk about. But yeah, I also have this team as a borderline wild card, and definitely interesting to see how they go about the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone across the league may want to tune in because they can keep tabs on those big stars and wonder, hey, can those stars be mine next year if this team can't gel it together right now? Can they finally be greater than can the sum finally be greater than the parts, perhaps? It'll be fascinating. But I suppose from there, we've called the Blue Jays flown from the coop because we can't possibly repeat the ambiguity of their success too much longer. Let's go back to the team that really has become the blueprint of success. If you go back to last year and notice, there was a new number one seed in the American League, and it was not a team that's held a number one seed in a very, very long time. We're talking, of course, about the Baltimore Orioles. It warmed my heart to see such a fabled franchise that has been stuck in the doldrums for such a long time return to the upper crust of the AL East this past year behind their star catcher Adley Rutschman and their exciting infielder, if I'm not mistaken, Gunnar Henderson, right? What a fantastic duo. How can they possibly get better? Oh, I don't know. How about a third amazing young dynamo that everyone and their mom is hoping earns a starting role coming into the start of this season? I'm talking, of course, of Justin Holiday. Can you imagine what it would be like if these three guys come out of the gates as hard and fiery as Baltimore left 2023 on? I can imagine partnered with their new ace, so to speak, Corbin Burns. This team is only going to get better. I mean, it's hard to say why they can't just simply repeat as divisional champions. And I'm wondering if you're going to give me an argument against it with what your early research with this team has offered. They haven't lost a ton. They've returned many. And I don't think of many of the pieces they've lost as indispensable, whether it's Aaron Hicks, Adam Frazier, meh, Kyle Gibson, you know how I feel about that. And Jorge Lopez, Jack Flaherty also was on the out. That's quite a name, but Jack Flaherty's career kind of doesn't look as exciting as it did a few years ago.
Going down.
They did exactly. Yeah, going down. So they didn't lose anybody too awful and bring in Craig Kimbrell, of course, Corbin Burns, really, really strengthening the pitching, also adding Matt Crook and infielder Ryan O'Hearn. So they didn't need to add a whole lot from the outside, and they're going to add one more huge piece from the inside, it sounds like. Aren't you excited to watch Baltimore play? Because it's the youth movement on display, and it's already so good.
Yeah, they were a surprise to a lot of teams last year. Definitely not to Baltimore fans who saw this coming, who have been excited about some of these younger players getting a full season to play. I know I saw Ryan Moncalso enter the league 3 years ago and was excited for him, and he came up to speed relatively quickly, and he's already approaching, the top of the order for this team. And he's in the DH right now. But you mentioned Jackson Holiday has not taken an at-bat in the majors, and he's projected as the number 1 overall prospect in the league. And a team that's already had so many talented young players come up and play for them. Jackson Holiday projects to, if not start with the team this year, be with them very quickly. So a lot of exciting youth. And the exciting thing about having all this youth is that they're all under control for another 1 to 2 years. And I think we could agree that the ownership is really excited about this, to the point, like you mentioned, they had a really pretty good starting rotation last year, a great bullpen, and they went harder on both. Sign Craig Kimbrell, trade for Corbin Burns. Like, let's take this home. They took advantage of a slumping Yankees last year, and it looks to me like they are foot on the gas. Like, they don't care how good any other team in the division gets. This team is going to push as hard as they can to get back into the postseason.
Absolutely. They have a lot of players I like. We'll start with the lineup, especially with Cedric Mullins. Love watching Cedric Mullins play center field. Agile, defensively capable, and he's not bad with a bat in his hand, and his power, if I'm not mistaken, is increasing. I'll have to remind myself if that's correct. Anyway, Adley Rutschman I mentioned, shortstop Gunnar Henderson, fantastic stuff. Anthony Santander had a lot of highlights last year. I was watching plenty of Orioles highlights, curious how they were doing what they were doing, and Santander's got some clutch swings. He reminds me a bit of a Marcus Semien in his best moments. So when it comes to swinging the bat anyway. Ryan O'Hearn, again, joins this lineup at the first. And we also have Mountcastle, as you said, somebody who excites you. Austin Hayes is another person I've got my eye on as he continues to mature. And maybe Jordan Westberg at the third base is a bit of a no-name comparatively, but this team doesn't need everybody to be lights out on the depth charts. James McCann, Ramon Urias, Jorge Mateo is an excellent bench piece to have. Are you kidding me? And Nick Maton also makes out that bench. I don't feel like this team is stressed too much about playing together offensively. I think that you get these young kids who just want to continue to prove how ready they are to be the faces of the league all together. And I think good times are going to flow. I do see this as a playoff team. I don't see them regressing. It would take substantial sophomore slumps and or no-shows from some of this already proven potency. And I just don't see that happening. So a lot of the teams are going to have to prove that they can get past Baltimore one way or another, as Texas did in the playoffs. And that's where experience, right? That's where the one Achilles heel to a team like this flares up and fires back. And when you get to those playoffs, it helps to have some experience. And now at least Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson know what it's like to be on the stage and fall off of it. So, hey, that could be enough to bring new power to their belief that they belong at playoff baseball and postseason a postseason. Guys, you know what? Sometimes I had too many peas. I'll admit it. I'm so sorry.
You're a pea man.
I pee all the time, bro. Gotta pause. These Baltimore Orioles are good, guys. That's all I need to say. And what do you think, Dan? Are they a playoff team waiting to happen again?
Yeah, I think they're totally a playoff team. I mean, over 100 wins last year is so impressive. And you mentioned sophomore slumps. It would be irresponsible to say that every player is going to play up to their potential this year. There will probably be a struggle here or there. But there's reason to be optimistic with how well this team performed. And you mentioned they were red hot heading into the postseason, and they ran straight into a brick wall in the Texas Rangers. And we will talk about more teams that did the exact same thing. And just like Arizona in the National League, they caught a lot of teams off guard. So the experience is valuable, no doubt that they were there, but they need to build on it, absolutely. So, sorry,
we should take. Sorry, it's okay. We should take a quick second to point out that there are some sad tints to the story, right? Kyle Bradish, John Means, and Felix Bautista are all dealing with either a portion of the season taken away from them, or in the case, sadly, of Felix Bautista, the entire season as he recovers from Tommy John's. How do you feel about how they might recover from that scenario? What's the key to ensuring they don't lose any steam because of that?
Yeah, so a couple of those guys will hopefully see back this year in Bradish and Means, but it definitely hurts not to have them. And Burns is a great addition to the rotation, but this means some other players are going to have to step up, notably Grayson Rodriguez.
Yep.
He was able to actually rebound towards the end of last year, turned his ERA around from over 7 to just above 2. So great turnaround, increased his confidence. Really, really hoping that he can help build on this team. And something that will hopefully help them as far as the pitching department is concerned. They moved the left wall of Camden Yards back this year. And so there's actually something I wasn't super aware of, but pitchers tend to get blown up by that left wall. A lot of balls flew out of there that in most other parks it would not be going out that far. Kind of a deterrent for a lot of people. By pushing that back, it's actually a little bit more attractive to get some free agent pitchers in there, and it will help the pitchers they already have. It'll turn a lot of home runs into singles and doubles, and that is exactly what they need, especially with a talented outfield. Their outfield, you ran through all the players there, and it's kind of interesting to note that their 1 through 9 is all 30 years old or young. Even the names coming off the bench, the oldest guy they have is James McCann. He's only 33. I mean, right. Their outfield as actually kind of the veterans of this team, the 28 and 29-year-olds in Mullins, Santander, and Hayes. These are the guys that were part of the Baltimore teams a few years ago that were really struggling. So that's kind of lacking the veteran in a traditional sense. That's the veteran leadership that's hopefully going to lead them. And on the pitching side of things, you bring in a guy like Corbin Burns, who's had that playoff experience, who's been the ace of the team before. And, it really does reinforce them in several different areas. So we talking about all of these things, in addition to the excitement around Jackson Holiday, I don't care how good the rest of the division got. I'm on the hype train for Baltimore, Warren.
Yeah, you're not prepared. You're not super prepared. There's a lot of again, poise and potency and passion coming out of these kids who are playing at their best level and now want to just remind everybody that they can remain at the best level. And their bench is, going to rise to the occasion to keep them there. And it's not just Jackson Holiday guys who are a part of the youth movement. There's 3 other top 100 prospects across Major League Baseball that could come out of their pipeline here in 2024. 19th overall Major League Baseball prospect Colton Cowser, outfielder, could come out pretty quickly. We'll have Kobe Mayo, a third baseman or first baseman, depending on how they might use him, coming from AAA. And then Heston Kjerstad will continue his push out in the outfield. Lots of youth looking to make dividends and waves for Baltimore. And hey, there's another very watchable team for that reason alone. When you have so much energy on the field from all this youth and all of, again, they were a division leader last year. Like, this is a team to watch and I can't wait, man. I can't wait. This is a great division. This is a really great division for a good, entertaining baseball. Good luck anybody trying to fly further and faster than Baltimore. It'll be tough. But guys, not as tough as the path forward for our next team, a team that, gosh, had a real heartbreaking scenario occur to them across their roster, having to say goodbye to whom could have been a cornerstone of their future. I'm talking about Wander Franco and the Tampa Bay Rays and their tragic separation of history. Now that it seems as if we won't get to see Wander Franco become who he could have been in Major League Baseball. Tampa Bay was spinning their wheels much of the offseason and gave a lot of key pieces away in trades. And still, somehow, Dan, and I'll need your help here. As much as I have enjoyed Tampa Bay Rays baseball in the years past, because I have such an affinity for manta rays, guys, I think they're like the coolest animals. Anyway, as much as I enjoy Tampa Bay baseball, I can't see them as being the same contender that so many pundits want to write them in as. Like, I get their program can turn out decent pitchers. I get their program knows how to coach great young players that they then switch into future assets. Like, that's the MO of the Rays. They're like a successful Pittsburgh Pirates philosophy, if you know what I mean. So it's crazy that, like, everybody still thinks this is a playoff team when they've lost Tyler Glasnow and Robert Stevenson and Luke Raley and Manuel Margot, and Wander Franco, and have only replaced them with guys like, gosh, Johnny DeLuca, Chris Davinsky, Ahmed Rosario is maybe their best pickup at shortstop, Francisco Mejia, Phil Maton, Ryan Pepiot, sorry guys, Pepiot, and one of my Mariners, they did grab Jose Caballero, who was one of those problematic types of under your skin opponents that nobody really wants to face at second base, but a world beater he is not. So, like, how does Tampa turn this into a contender like some of the pundits predict, Dan? Do they read like a contender to you, these Tampa Bay Rays?
Yeah, a lot of good points there, Warren, but I got to start right off the top. Is a devil ray a manta ray? Is that the same thing?
Nah, man, I'm pretty sure a devil ray is, yeah, actually, wait, no, I did read that.
They were the devil rays, right?
Yeah, and then, people were like, "Hey, devil's like the opposite of God. We got to get rid of it." That's my Florida accent, guys.
That's Florida. Yeah. Is that a stingray? Florida. Is that the same thing as a stingray, or is that different as a manta ray?
A manta ray is different from a stingray because manta rays don't sting. They just have like those mouths that just like won't quit. You know what I mean? I don't know if they just like suck plankton. That was for our YouTube channel, guys. If you're listening in, you got to check out our YouTube channel.
Now you have to.
Yeah, you got to know what a manta ray looks like, don't you?
I just want to know which one killed Steve Irwin.
That would be a stingray. It is still, Dan, it's still too soon. How dare you?
You're right. I'm sorry. It's only been 23 years.
Oof. And that might be real. I have to look up how long it's been, but 23
I don't think it's been that long.
Yeah, that sounds a little long, but it's okay.
That is a long time. Moving on to your second
Yeah. What about the baseball team, bro?
You got to feel for the Rays a little bit, man. Wander Franco dug his own grave. I don't feel bad for him, but I do feel bad for the team that locked him up very young, long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just a really good player that they lost. And with him, Margot, and Raleigh gone, it feels like their whole outfield is gone. But
Yeah, I'm with you. It really does feel that way.
yeah, so there's still like a team that did really well last year in terms of hitting and pitching, and a lot of those players are returning. So
Sure.
there's reason to believe they can repeat some of the same success. But we have to recognize, 99 wins for the Rays last year is really good. But you mentioned all of the names that are no longer on the team. I think we could agree the division has gotten stronger around them. The Rays have
Mm-hmm.
not gotten stronger. So just right off the bat, I just see regression all over this team. And the one area that I'm confident in is the pitching. There is a couple red flags here and there, but this is an organization that has just handled pitching incredibly well for several years and
True.
taken several pitchers who have not performed well and turned them around. So if there's one area I'm confident in this team, it's the pitching. But are they a
Yep.
playoff team? I don't know, Warren. I really don't think so right now.
I think it would be tough for them. It really would be tough for them. There's just a couple of teams out there fighting their scenarios with a little bit more, tooth to it, a little bit more punch, a little bit more fervor this year. Like maybe Tampa will play or will be in the hunt for some free agents next year, 2025. Maybe it's a team that I know historically doesn't pay players to come play for them. They really don't. But maybe, just maybe, they'll see how this year goes and wonder how to shore up some of their strengths going into next season. I mean, we'll be remiss to completely forget that last year they were the scariest team in baseball for the first, 4 months of the season. If you recall, their record it felt historic as a fan watching that season unfold, where they were just getting out to one of the hottest starts in history that I could recall. But and to that point, a number of these players have returned. It's not like everybody's gone. There's just a different feeling to the culture now and a different momentum behind them, or really a momentum that's not there to begin with. So you gotta hope, to a certain extent, that maybe we're overplaying all these changes. And yes, the proven pitching program over in Tampa produces more powerful throwers, but it's really hard for me to say their stock is higher than some of the other teams in and outside of this division. Hey, any game can be their chance, right? Theoretically, when you've got Yandy Diaz, when you've got Brandon Lau, when you've got Randy Arozarena, who's one of the most entertaining players in postseason time frames, especially Josh Lowe, Isaac Paredes, like this, there it is. There's your lineup. You're okay, right? Jose Siri, Jose Caballero, and Rene Pinto join Jonathan Aranda on the back of that. But you got good contact. You've got some decent power, and nobody's particularly old. None of these players I've named outside of Yandy Diaz has broken 30 yet. So there's still ceilings to appreciate, but I love, and I harp on it all the time. You talk about the intangibles of the story of a team, and the intangibles for Tampa are steps behind several of the others that they will be competing for wild card berths with, right? So they have to hope the other top tier team near the top of the division this year, New York. I'm just gonna get it out there. New York is not going to be as good as they think they'll be. They have to hope that Toronto truly is full of Swiss cheese like holes that we're predicting. And they have to hope there are some sophomore slumps. And we won't even talk about Boston yet. Like, oof. But Tampa is really going to be benefiting from all of that in order to get a postseason berth, I think. But I mean, I can't help but root for him a tad. It's not their fault Wander Franco turned out to be who he was. It just breaks my heart, Dan. It does.
Yeah, I know, but the reality of it is that you lost Franco, Margot, and Raleigh, and you're bringing in DeLuca, Mejia, and Rosario, and it's not the same. And you cannot expect the same level of of hits, of runs, of everything, and low, I don't know, man. All I know is I'll watch Randy and Yandy, and I'm sure this team will slug, but you're right. I don't think it'll be enough to keep up in the division. And the pitching side of things. I mean, we should mention that Tyler Glasnow is no longer on the team, but
Yeah.
they have a rotation, and that could really be the strength of this team. I mean, they may only generate 1 to 2, maybe 3 runs a game. That might be all they need with this rotation.
Well, sure. Zach Eflin certainly reads to me as that kind of player, and I do feel like guys who make up their bullpen who might take a turn. I mean, Pete Fairbanks was a former starter for them, so seeing him come out of the bullpen feels atypical to me. But they're shuffling things around. I'm just not so sure. I'm sold on say maybe Aaron Savale was their key contribution to this starting rotation in a trade they made in July 23 with the Cleveland Guardians. I'm just not, I think he did what he needed to do to be helpful to them closing out last year, but he seems a bit like a Kyle Gibson type to me, right? And you heard what I said about him as he's gone over to St. Louis. Just a friendly reminder, he's just kind of meh. That's all. Just a little meh. But the team's going to have to be better than meh in this case. So you'll have to hope that they can take steps forward and prove me wrong. It's you've said it yourself, Dan. Tampa Bay is known for churning out quality pitchers and improving ones who don't look on paper like they are so. And as a Seattle fan, another franchise that I think does do that well, it gives anybody, excuse me, a puncher's chance. So it's not out of the question. It just feels like the wins are different for Tampa, and they'll need to change them in order to succeed.
Yeah, they definitely do, and they have. Hopefully, they have Drew Rasmussen coming back this year from injury.
Oh, good point. Yes.
But Shea McClanahan's going to be out for the year, recovering from Tommy John's. Jeffrey Springs will probably miss most of the year. Might be healthy later towards the end of the year, but probably not going to help you for the most part. So, there's a lot that they really need to rebound from. And I mean, I was really kind of surprised, Warren. I gotta say, when I thought Rays, not watching this team regularly the last couple of years, outside of the postseason, the last thing I thought about was their World Series appearance in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I thought about was Kevin Cash and his controversial pitching decisions in that series. And he's still there, Warren. Kevin Cash is still the manager of this team. That's a lot of faith in the manager.
Right. Strategy. I mean, you can do a great job getting the arms and the minds ready for the opportunities, but if your coach or your general manager is making decisions that seem misaligned as was the case then, it's just old habits that repeat themselves in the wrong direction. So we'll hope that there isn't an opportunity for Kevin Cash to cash out his opportunities to continue coaching for Tampa, but we'll be looking out for him, guys. You better believe it. Dan, how about that? Let's actually tab that. Let's look for where Kevin Cash should cash out, or the Tampa Bay Rays should cash him out. Because bonehead calls happen, and they could very well be the determining factor when a team really needs to win something. So, good luck, Kevin Cash.
Yeah, good luck, Kevin Cash. I mean, you're really going to need it. I don't see this team going back to the postseason currently. I like I said, I think I'm kind of being a little generous with their pitching. I'm hoping that they will do well, both sides of the staff. All of their starting pitching metrics were top 5 in the league last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and relief pitching was in the upper half. So there's every reason to believe that they can return. But yeah, I'm going to stick with regression and missing the postseason for the Tampa Bay Manta Ray Devil Steve Irwins.
Oh, and don't forget the current logo with the splotch of yellow is really just supposed to be a sun ray. So
you want to talk? That's right. So they're the Tampa Bay Rays, as in the sunshine rays. So
they're the Tampa Rainbow Manta Devil Sun Rays. Because don't forget their logos are rainbow so often, so you got to have pride in that. And we do. We're always side with pride. But that being said, you talk about a team with identity problems. I think this one is all in their mascot, right?
Yeah, man. And with you saying that right now, I just changed my mind, and they are my new favorite team. So they're gonna win the division.
Yes, yes. Let's do it. Let's do it. Good. Well, I'll talk about a team now that, some people say, maybe because of history and because of the sheer power of the franchise, that they're still potentially playoff contenders in this 2024 layout. But in my American League East, this is the basement dweller. Something tells me you'll agree. I have very little faith in one of baseball's best franchises and most fabled teams. We're talking, of course, about the Boston Red Sox. It's weird to see them not trying so hard to be a winning baseball team, and that's what it feels like after this postseason. They've given some important parts away, whether it be in trades or free agency, and haven't been in a hurry to add a whole hell of a lot. They finished fifth in the AL East last year at 78 and 84. Of course, completely whiffing on the playoffs. No way they were making it with that record. They've lost Justin Turner, Adam Duvall, Alex Verdugo, James Paxton, Corey Kluber, and Chris Sale. Oh my God. They've added only a handful of names that feel like they could be of help, and some of them are already on the IL. Tyler O'Neill, Vaughn Grissom, Lucas Giolito is that one I referenced, who's probably going to be having some IL time to start the season. Nicholas Jadis, right-handed relief pitcher. Richard Fitz, another of the kind. Oh, and one more right-handed relief pitcher, Liam Hendricks. We've heard of him. Yeah, it's a good pickup, I will say. I like Liam Hendricks for this team. And first baseman C.J. Cron, most recently of the L.A. Angels, going over to the Red Sox. But is that enough? Is that enough? Is that enough? You heard how much got given away by the Red Sox. I don't think it's enough. What's your take, Dan? Am I wrong? Is this the best team in the American League East, and I'm just being a total jerk about it?
Nope.
Oh, okay, good. And we're ready for our next team. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
All right. No, man, it's dark days. It's crazy how Boston has been somehow over the last 20 years one of the most successful franchises in the league by winning multiple World Series and finishing last in the division more than any other team in their division. It's insane, and it just feels like ever since Mookie left this team, it has been a steady slope downward. Ownership is, in my opinion, and I think a lot of Red Sox fans' opinions, all in about profits. They think they can get away with having a barely competitive team, that they'll still fill the seats, and often they do. And it's unfortunate to see their payroll only declining. Currently, they are 10th in the league in payroll. They have traditionally, in the years that they've been competitive, been top 5, or if not in the top 3. It's unusual to see them that low, but it is continuing to drop. So definitely trending in the wrong direction. And then to make things even worse, you mentioned Lucas Giolito, who had one start in spring training and then has a partially torn UCL, and it's not confirmed yet, and hopefully we're wrong about this, but he could well be out for Tommy John surgery. And Warren, he signed a 2-year contract. If he gets Tommy John surgery in the next couple weeks here, right, let's just say within the next month, take his recovery time of roughly a year and a half, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years. He signed a 2-year contract. He might not pitch for this team over the life of that contract. And this is a team who just signed him after just moving on from Chris Sale, who was a big contract that was just riddled with injuries. So it's not that Boston isn't doing anything, but man, their luck has been real poor on that side of things.
Yes, their luck has been poor, and their front office seems out of touch enough to avoid pivoting. And this is fine. You see the dog meme with fire all around. This is fine. That's what Boston feels like to me while it's all burning to the ground. And I can't find solutions. I swear to God, I would love to be able to say, come on, man. I mean, look, or just wait until, I got nothing. I got nothing to help a Boston team that doesn't seem ready to help itself. And it's too bad, because they've got some incredibly potent young talent still on this lineup. I'm a big Tristan Casas fan, for the record, at first base. If in a lesser period of my fandom, I would have wished to have him instead of a Ty France on the Seattle Mariners, for example. I love that he's 24 years of age and still absolutely ready to blossom even more as a player. You still have Trevor Story. You still have Rafael Devers. You still have Jaron Duran, who I also like as a young and capable young bat in center field, and a solid defensive one for that matter. I even like Matsutaka Yoshida. He's so good. He's got great contact numbers, and he's a great fielder. He's speedy, and he's one of those, international players, I'll say, that play with such passion and want to win. Like, they've got it. Theoretically, you still have a Tyler O'Neill they picked up in that trade with St. Louis earlier this offseason, right? Or, in December. And so, like, you want to think that they're ready to take a step at least forward. And who knows? Maybe they'll outplay the Rays at least. Maybe we can have an argument over that. Maybe they don't belong in the basement this year, but I mean, it's not necessarily looking better that they could get any stronger than that. Picking up Rob Refsnyder was actually a good grab for them, as was CJ Crone. And Reese McGuire was traded a couple years ago from Chicago, and I like Reese too. So it's not like any of these players don't have at least some upside. It's just from the lineup, it doesn't feel as if it'll be enough. You got to have more. And your pitchers are woeful. Garrett Whitlock is no one to inspire power, but he's got maybe the best projected ERA out of this starting rotation that's kind of pieced together in the face of what they're going through. Nick Pivetta, Brian Bello, any of these pitchers do anything for you, Dan?
No, man, not at all. I mean, it's for sure you got like Pivetta, Bello, and arguably Crawford are, your starters, and it's not necessarily impressive, but they're guys that can eat up innings. And yeah, it's a mess behind them. Christopher Whitlock and a bunch of other names, and it just seems like this is Boston. Why aren't they going after Snell or Montgomery?
Right.
And they might be. There's been connections to Montgomery, and if anything happens like it has in the past, Warren, we're going to sign off, and 10 minutes later, Montgomery and Snell will sign with Boston.
Yes.
But
now, Dan, as you know, I've been saying I really do think that Jordan Montgomery joins this team at some point, especially with what they're going through with their rotation. Just pay the man and bring him home. It is his hometown. I understand he wants to pitch there. Get Montgomery on this team now if you want the fan base to believe you care at all. Wouldn't you say?
Totally. And we saw the two Boris free agents that have signed so far, Bellinger and Chapman, both took 3-year deals with multiple opt-outs. They will both likely opt out after year one if they have a good year, and then they'll get the long-term extension that they could not get. I think Boris overplayed his hand here. It's not assured that the pitchers will go the same way. We'll see one sign and the other will do something similar, but yeah, it very much looks like a situation where it'll be probably not the long-term contract, shorter term with some opt-outs. But if it's a team like this, then absolutely, Montgomery would want to stay there, and it would be a win-win for both sides. And you brought up a good point. It's a good comparable. How does this team stack up against the Rays? Maybe some people have the Rays ranked a little bit higher. Me personally, I have them towards the bottom. And yeah, them and Boston are right there. And what's going to be the deciding factor in that? The pitching is a big part of it. The Rays have a much stronger staff than Boston does. On the hitting side of things, the Rays come out, but there's reason to believe that you got guys like you mentioned, Trevor Story and Rafael Devers.
Yeah.
If these guys can really live up to their contract and perform, they can lead some of the younger players on this team. And there isn't a lot of them, like we mentioned, but I think that there's potential there if everything goes right. I wouldn't have them just based off of projections as getting a better record than the Rays would. But I will say, you mentioned a couple guys like Yoshida. That's somebody who's going to have another full season under his belt who will likely and hopefully continue to improve. And that coupled with some of these other players, maybe they'll be better than we expect.
True. But playoffs are very unlikely. But that's what, that's what the pundits are saying. It's not going to be a very easy hill to climb at this junction. we'll hope for them that they add in maybe one more big free agent piece. Maybe they get great performances out of some of these pickups that are recent or brand new to them. That bullpen with Chris Martin and Kenley Jensen, a decent 1-2 punch right at the back end. And I will say they've got a bullpen filled out by one of our former players on each team. I don't know if you noticed, but the Mets traded away Justin Slayton to this team. Have you watched Justin Slayton pitch and can speak on what the Red Sox got with him?
No.
Okay, and I
where do you see Justin Slate?
I might be
Oh no, he's from
looking.
Texas.
Oh, it says New York Mets, so I'm so sorry I put you on the
It
spot.
does say New York Mets, but I honestly, let me check really quick. I do not remember that name at all. No, he has no service time. I think yeah, he's
What
just
about
been in the
Jolie?
minors.
What about how about this name for you that appears to have been a Met back in 2022? Do you remember what it was like when Jolie Rodriguez pitched for you guys? He is 32. He's got to have some experience that you've seen.
Absolutely, yeah. Jolie, we saw coming out of the pen. He did get blown up a little bit. Kind of a high velocity guy who you would hope he would kind of have some stuff. But he really struggled with breaking balls. He was a good fastball pitcher, but he couldn't get anything else really into his mix, and got blown up more often than not, which is why the Mets moved on from him. Showed flashes though. It's the kind of guy that hopefully he gets a good coach, can play with his repertoire. It's the kind of player you see add a pitch to his mix, and all of a sudden he's a different player. So maybe they could figure something out with him.
I will say they have a Isaiah Campbell, a former Seattle Mariner who got called up to the big leagues about halfway through last season and was a really stable arm for us, if I'm being honest. Like, I was hoping he would dodge the trades that I knew were supposed to be coming this offseason, but he did not. I like that he ended up on the Boston Red Sox, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's actually a pretty important medium leverage arm for them. And I wish him all the luck because he was a good kid for Seattle, played well in the limited time he was up on the main roster. And I do see him being helpful to them. So, it would take all of the sum of these parts and more, though, and a lot of collapsing from the teams above their heads to make Boston capable of punching into the playoffs. And I'm telling you, I'm not going to put them on my playoff bracket. What about you? Some of these parts going to do it for you? I bet not.
No chance, and it's a shame. I'd like to see Boston competitive, but they just aren't. And I think that ownership and management has not really made that commitment, and it's a shame. It's profit driven. It's unfortunate for an organization as storied as them. Hopefully, we see it change sometime soon. But this year, they should be in the basement again.
So a tale of two storied franchises is about to see the other page turn, okay? The Boston Red Sox historically have the biggest rivalry in the league with the one and the only the Bronx Bombers, the New York Yankees, the team I love to hate almost as much as I hate the Astros. The Yankees did, right? Their ownership did commit in the biggest way, in the way that Boston only wishes their ownership did, because God, New York swung for the fences and brought back a ton of apparent dividends with what they did in this offseason. And we saved them for last because not only are the big bad Bombers, but they really are big and they really are bad this year. And there's no reason outside of the intangibles to expect them to be pretty awesome, right? Anything less than pretty awesome. This team is built to beat a lot of people. Tell us what they did in the offseason and why the New York Yankees have us shaking in our knees once again.
Man, if the Yankees wanted one thing at the end of last offseason, it was a left-handed bat. If they wanted three things, it was a left-handed bat, a corner outfielder, and a power hitter. If they could get those three things, Warren, man, and it was a rough season last year for the Yankees, but if they could get those three things, and just three things, Warren, I mean, that's tough, but they got All three in Juan
Oh,
Soto.
oh
Man,
my God. What a coup.
it's incredible for 1 year of Juan Soto.
Yep.
There's certainly have the option to negotiate an extension, but all signs point to Juan Soto testing free agency for the first time in his young career. Warren, this is his third team. It'll be his first free agency period. So
Wow.
massive addition for the Yankees and exactly what they needed. Injects a lefty into the lineup, and they added some more lefties, which is, man, they struggled so much last year because they were not well built, and then they had some key injuries, unfortunately. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the Juan Soto thing just right off the bat. I mean, I can hear the Imperial March in the background, Warren. The Yankees are
Yeah.
coming back.
Ba, 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 ba. And it feels that way, man. It's tough to be a fan of Major League Baseball and know that the Yankees are going to be that hard to beat, yet that fun to watch. Like, oh no. I mean, let's dig. We're gonna dig, of course, after we kind of run down the lineup here on what's got them so scary. But we're gonna dig for the Achilles heel somewhere. And I think, as I said, intangibles are where it lies. And of course, health. Health is everything. Health is absolutely everything. And it's not like the players on this team are immune to injuries more than anybody else. But I'm shaking, literally thinking that all of these players will pop off at the same time. We're talking DJ LeMahieu, right? Don't you love that guy? Isn't
One of my
LeMahieu like,
favorites.
and you're not supposed to, dude. You're the
I
other
know.
New Yorker. How can DJ LeMahieu literally be a favorite of yours? Tell me about that.
Dude, he's a beautiful ball player. He plays every infield position, and he does so masterfully. Probably better on the left side of the infield, but even from his days back in Colorado, and more so than that, he's an on base guy. He's not really a slugger. He's an on base guy. He's one of the always, not always, but most of his career, he's been a leadoff guy. He's always made good
Mm-hmm.
contact, takes walks, double digit home runs, nothing too crazy. He's a sneaky good ball player. He's that guy you want on a playoff roster.
He's a glue guy. He's one of those glue
Exactly.
guys. And I feel like they picked up another glue guy in the name of Alex Verdugo, right? To add
Yeah.
yet more cohesiveness here to just ensure you're going to get some guys on base and maybe a ball over the left field wall. I hear you. I don't blame you. I can see why he's at least exciting to watch. Now, Juan Soto is joined, of course, by Aaron Judge. They have a twin pairing of MVP candidates in the outfield. How exciting is that if you're a New York Yankees fan? Which one of these do you think can fly higher for the team this year?
Ooh, that's a good question. Soto really needs to have a good year if he's entering a contract year and he really wants to maximize. So I can see him really popping off. But yeah, Judge is moving to center field predominantly to hopefully stay healthy. And this team died when Judge went down last year. So if he
Yeah.
can stay healthy for a full year, I don't know. There might be a chance we see Judge approach some of those numbers he hit back when he was a rookie.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, health is a big factor at this point. I've heard rumors, and it even is reflected in a projected starting lineup or two, that Aaron Judge has moved full time to center field. How does that? I mean, you got to think that bodes a little unintelligently if you're trying to protect one of your biggest names and one of your best bats from getting a little worn out earlier on in the season. I would call that a bit of a red flag in decision making. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because this was something that I took note of going into spring training. And Judge actually made a joke in an interview that he got hurt so much in right that they moved him to center. But he got hurt running into walls and shit. Like, dude, the walls are still there. and,
Yeah.
and it's a more athletic position, in my opinion. And I've seen a lot of center fielders have serious injuries. And it's concerning. It's very concerning. And Judge is clearly conscious of that, so you can hope for the best. Having a guy like Soto to his left, and the rotation to his right of Verdugo and Grisham, should have mentioned, also came over from San Diego. That's
Yeah.
a really solid outfield. So it's
That's
not
the
like
guy. That's the guy you should have in your center field, New York. If you
Right.
don't mind me saying, have Trent Grisham patrolling center, have Aaron Judge hanging out where he's at home, and don't forget Giancarlo Stanton is still on this team. I'm not saying he should be playing outfield super frequently at this stage, and is probably better off as a designated hitter, excuse me. But he did come to camp, I understand, in some of the best shape of his life, of his career
Yeah.
anyway. So Giancarlo Stanton maybe is a better athlete this year than he's been in years past. I don't know. I feel like
Well,
maybe they'll learn quickly how well Judge might fare health-wise out there if they're not careful.
yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, Stanton has kind of locked down that DH position for them. He can play in the outfield, but he really does. He's age 34 now, Stanton. He's going to turn 35.
Sure.
He's better off as the DH. And you bring up a good point. If Judge steps into DH, and he did step into DH in the past, he spent time there before, that pushes Stanton to the bench, and then there is a little bit of a mix that they're going to have to play with and figure out. Aaron Boone is going to have decisions he's going to have to make day to day here to figure out who's playing where, because Soto has also had time at DH, and guys like Verdugo and Grisham, you don't want them to get too cold, so you got to work in
Mhm.
playing time for them. DH is not going to be it. So that means starting out in left field. And it's just hopefully guys win the jobs and it's not so much of an issue, but it could be a little bit of a mix, and one injury could really throw a cog in things. But they're starting off strong.
Hey, they are starting off strong, and they have to. They've got so many new toys. They've got to play with a lot of different lineups and compositions here to determine what works best. And we were hinting earlier that maybe the other team who put as many veterans on their lineup as possible to try to find answers, the Toronto Blue Jays, maybe these two teams have a bit of a similar issue here. You want to dig for intangibles to make this team weaker. It's the question of who plays where and when in this situation that they really should focus on figuring out fast, because I do think it drags away from the focus of winning and winning consistently and everyone knowing their role. Am I thinking a little too, I don't know, cavalier about this? Do you see this being a situation similar to what we might see in Toronto? Or do you find that there will be cohesive answers faster than expected?
Yeah, I do trust Aaron Boone. He's a good manager. He's a player's manager. He's a smart guy and a good communicator. And I don't think they'll have too many issues internally as far as that's concerned. The Yankees keep things pretty straight knit as far as that's concerned. There is
Okay.
the idea, though, of Soto, who's been a
Ah,
personality in the
yeah,
past, especially
yeah,
on the teams he's been
uh-huh,
on before. And the
yeah,
Yankees spent so much money to get him. Clearly, they want to lock him up. New
uh-huh.
York is a huge media market, and we have seen so many
Mhm.
guys go there and really, really struggle with the
Ooh.
mass media. I don't know how Soto's going to do, but I could tell you I'm not optimistic. And I could also tell you if he
Ooh.
doesn't have a good experience, I don't think he'll be super excited about coming back no matter how much money they throw at him. I mean, I hear the Mets talking about already like, "Oh, how much money is Koa going to throw at Soto in the offseason to compete with the Yankees?" Man, he might not even want to come to New York depending on how this year goes. Personality, you're right. This is Aaron Judge's team. No one, Soto is not going to change that, but personality and media could be an issue this year.
I love that. I love that as my Achilles heel that we'll dig oh so hard for. And I know we've had conversations in the past and are about this specific topic, so I'm glad it came back, because I do wonder how Juan Soto as a locker room fits. I mean, it's kind of strange that a guy of his talent has bounced around from team to team. That's not exactly something you do unless you're kind of part of the issue, don't you think? And if he fails to adapt to New York media pressure, I mean, it doesn't matter how well you're getting along with your fellow players, as we have seen him buddy up with Judge, but it doesn't matter if you're getting any sort of heat you're not enjoying and firing back a little too hard. So I like that. Oh yeah, let's get Juan Soto at like a I don't know, a season long suspension somehow. Like maybe he
Ooh.
punches an ump or something, or oh, that'd be cool if he like threw his bat at a fan. Oh, can you do that? Will that happen, Dan?
Yeah, I could see him cut maybe catching a ball over the foul line that he thinks is fair, and out of frustration
Yeah,
he turns around and just beans one into the crowd and hits a Red
yeah,
Sox fan.
yeah. Hit a
Oh wait,
Red
no,
Sox
the
fan.
fans like that. No, he hits a Yankee fan.
Oh, boo, boo. There we go. That would be great. Let's manifest that means to see New York flounder a little bit harder than we expect, because they don't look like they're going to flounder at all. They look like they're going to scare everybody away on paper. Oh, and then prove it on the field. But we haven't even started talking about this starting rotation, right? I think you would describe it as stacked, Dan.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. As a good one that just got arguably better.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Arguably? I mean, Stroman, Cole, Cortez, Rodon. No weaknesses here, am I right?
This team traded away Michael King to get Soto, and yeah, they still have Cortez slotted as their fifth starter. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they last year, and they had a couple of difficulties with injuries last year, but overall they
Sure.
were top 10 in most statistical categories. They really struggled with home runs. Their ERA wasn't the best, and it got worse as the year went on. They do have a couple of relief pitchers that are out because of injury, but for the most part, the starting staff comes in healthy. Marcus Stroman was a Met for a couple of years, so I can speak to him a little bit. He was with Chicago for the last two, did pretty well with them, and got himself
Mm-hmm.
a good contract with the Yankees. Stroman he throws with heat. He's a smaller guy, so he's a lower release, and that helps him. He's imposing on the mound, and he is really locked down on what he does well over the last few years to excel. He's an innings eater. He is perfect guy to slot into the middle of their rotation. And I mean, Cole is he's your ace. He has been the last several years. As he gets older, he somehow gets better. It's insane. We are waiting for his numbers to start dropping off, but they're not. And I don't think they will this year.
Dan, Gerrit Cole, Carlos Rodon, Marcus Stroman, top 3 rotation in at least the division, right? I can't say I believe that for the league, but at least for the division, those are the 3 strongest pitchers that any team is going to have in their first 3 days of play, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. They're top heavy, and they might not have the depth that some of the other teams do, but absolutely strongest starting staff.
If you win 3 out of your 5 games, you're probably going to go to the postseason. So that's pretty important. And yeah, what do you think of the bullpen? I mean, I like Jonathan Loizica. He's maybe one of the biggest names that jump out of it for me. And they didn't add a whole lot of super new, I would say, in this past offseason. Signing Ian Hamilton in January 23. That was a year ago, so we can't quite put it there. Caleb Ferguson did come over from the Dodgers just earlier last month. We do have Victor Gonzalez, also from the Dodgers, in December, and the Royals gave him Cody Potest. Any of these guys going to add any sort of powerful heat to their fire? Excuse me, Cody Poteet, guys. I apologize.
Yeah, so they depleted the bullpen a little bit, and they had a really strong bullpen last year, led the league for home runs and ERA, and they definitely needed to address by making some of the signs that they did. Overall, not as strong of a unit as last year, but still strong enough, especially bolstered by the strength of their starting pitching. You're not going to need a lot of innings out of this group. And that's the key thing here. If you can really limit these guys to 1 to 2 innings each, then you're not overextending them and you can get the best results out. So there are hopefully enough to get them to their closer.
Right. And, it's true that maybe that's the most legitimate on-field Achilles heel that the Yankees have. If you can get to their starters and get them into the bullpen until they get to back innings, they may struggle. But they do have, apart from the 41st ranked MLB prospect, Jason Dominguez, who's already slated to play in the outfield plenty this 2024. They do have one more relief pitcher who might come, or at least right-handed pitcher, I should say, to come out of their camp potentially this year in Chase Hampton, who is the 92nd prospect in Major League Baseball. Perhaps he can come in and be fresh enough to surprise some teams near those the back half of games, at least enough to help build that bridge to those powerful closing arms. But they will want to perhaps try him out, I think, because it does look like on field anyway, the bullpen is where the Yankees will need the most assistance, theoretically, anyway. but it's a pretty ironclad concept that this team is prepared to play postseason baseball once again. It would take a lot of injuries, it would take a lot of disappointments, or it would take a lot of intangible and unpredictable occurrences to keep New York from getting to that upper echelon in this division and maybe in the American League as a whole. You could argue, my friend, as I think we have in the past, the Yankees are the American League's Los Angeles Dodgers this year. They've done the most to say we must win now, and I hope Toronto took some notes, if I'm being honest. Toronto did their best, but this team tried way harder. So what do you think? I think it's at that point where we might take a look at the Pacoda and see what they say before we weigh in at long last on where all 5 of these teams will leverage out in 2024. We liked the Pagoda recently, guys. We found this little group of information to help us predict where everybody is standing based on some numerical projections and whether or not we agree or disagree. Why don't you break down what the results look like for the AL East for us this year, Dan?
Yeah, man. Should we say what Pacoda is? I don't know if we ever explained like what it is.
Yeah, no, I definitely would predict you to do better than that than I can. So jump right in. Help us enlighten us, if you will.
Sure. So PACOTA is it's an acronym. It stands for Player Empirical Comparison and Optimization Test Algorithm. It's a sabermetric, big, long, lots of numbers, nonsense, all this stuff. Essentially, it is a projection for how many games each team will win, and how it stacks out. It takes into account who they're playing and averages of all of their players over their history. So
there you go. It's very statistically based.
Yeah, exactly. We have examined the last couple years, Warren and I, of PACOTA, and we found that it is right as often as it's wrong. It gets some dead right on the money. It's completely wrong on some. In this division in the past, I think we saw that they've gotten Baltimore wrong the last several years. They have underestimated. So
I wonder if that trend will continue.
Yeah, so with that all in mind, this year, the PACOTA has AL East, the Yankees winning the division with 93 wins.
Okay.
Right behind them, Toronto with 88. That's a wild card spot. Baltimore behind them with 86. That is also a wild card spot, the last wild card spot. And then Tampa Bay Rays behind them also with 86 wins. And leading up the bottom, Boston with 78 wins.
Oh my God, PACOTA, you're so silly. You're drunk. Go home. Go
home.
Go ahead. Go home. Oh, good. Yes. Look, honestly, they're not as far off as I think they are. I do largely agree where many of these teams land. Certainly the bookends, right? I absolutely feel as if Boston will be maybe lucky to win 78 games, if you don't mind me saying. I do think New York Yankees will sit atop this division unless enough things go wrong. They are the runway is certainly clear for takeoff for New York to win at least 93. I would wager maybe that they win 4 or 5 more. Maybe they break 100. They definitely have the potential to. I only say they may not because when a team is this highly touted, they're usually at least falling short of that lofty goal, right? Now, when you look at Baltimore, though, sitting in the middle with 86 wins, I humbly disagree. I do think this is a 90-win team at minimum, and I do have them making the playoffs, as I said quite confidently earlier. So I'll put them in second place here. And then it's just the fun of deciding whether Toronto or Tampa sits next. And I think overall I'll put Toronto third. And I think that they do miss the playoffs. Thank you very much, because I kind of sort of have to say that. In my heart, I have to, and you'll know why in a few weeks. But the Rays do certainly miss the playoffs after a notable regression and do finish fourth in this division. So really, I just have Toronto and Baltimore flipping, and Baltimore winning a few more games. What do you think, Dan? I wonder if you'll disagree, or if you're a savant and you've learned enough about the American League in just days that we're right on the same page.
Yeah, I absolutely have not. So mine are not that different than yours. I also have the Yankees in first and Boston in last. I agree with you. Boston's not going to win that many games. And the Yankees 93 sounds about right to me, and I could see them winning some more, but it will be a tough division. And yeah, they have the middle three real close together, 88, 86, 86, Toronto, Baltimore,
Mhm.
Tampa. And I agree with you. I don't like that mix. I do have Baltimore second. I think Baltimore will challenge the Yankees for the division lead. I think that we shouldn't just assume the Yankees will have it. I think Baltimore will lock up that wild card spot. And I do have Toronto in third place. Not so close with the Rays, though. I have the Rays falling closer to Boston in fourth place than they are to Toronto in third. And I do have Toronto as that last wild card spot, Warren. Right now,
Yeah.
I things might change as we get through these other divisions.
Yeah, you really don't want us to talk baseball together too much longer, do you? But I'm going to be putting plenty of money on certain teams this year in my heart. And of course, if I'm let down, I'm let down. But I think it's a bold move to say Toronto is ready to do this. But if they are, I will say, in that, at least to bring things full circle in my allusion to the budding rivalry that Seattle and Toronto have, I will say that the window needs to be like explored for Toronto. You know what I mean? Like this is this versions of Toronto's final year to
Yeah,
do
Windows
it
is
or
big.
don't. Yeah. That's right, man. It's like just to go back to Star Wars references, it's like we're down in the garbage pit and the walls are coming in and there's that little eyeball that you can only compare to the general manager of the Yankees looking around like Aaron Boone, right? Like it's just Aaron Boone
Yeah.
looking around down there and they're scary and that's fine. But like the walls are closing in on Toronto. If that was your Chewbacca, we'll talk about it later. Um so Toronto needs this more than Seattle, and if Toronto wants to win over them this year, they're going to have to earn it. But it's true. Like Toronto needs the playoffs, or this is the last time I think we'll be talking about Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr., and so many of these great players theoretically on the same lineup in that city. So, so much good storylines in this division. Now that we've broken down the NL divisions and we've weighed in on this one of the AL, can I ask you, dude, is this already to you the most exciting division of the American League? And are they even more exciting than the National League to you all of a sudden?
So this division is definitely more competitive than I would say several of the divisions in the National League. Um, but I don't know if I call it the most exciting, just because I do feel like they're a little top heavy. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's top three heavy, but still, I'm interested in the AL West. You know, your Mariners division, Warren. I think there's a lot of unknowns there. I think there's a lot of people assuming Houston is going to come back, and I don't think they're going to have Verlander as they did. So I don't know that they will come back quite as strong as they did before. And I mean,
Oh.
who knows what the Angels will be without Otani? A lot of question marks.
We'll have more answers, of course, in the coming weeks. I imagine, excuse me, we will have a quick pit stop in the Central along the way,
Quick.
and quick, guys, quick, like an hour and 15 minutes, like we so much like to do. But we hope during today's presentation of covering our bases, we covered your bases just well enough. Do let us know in the comments if we are foolish to view the Red Sox as the lesser of the fabled franchises in this division. Please tell us in the comments if you believe that the Rays still have plenty in their toolkit to produce a playoff contender. Please tell us in the comments if by any chance Toronto is the team that invested the right type of assets into trying to build a contender one last time around the core that they have as we know it, and tell us in the comments, excuse me, if Baltimore is the young exciting team America deserves, like some of us wish to paint them as. And tell us in the comments how exactly all of us are going to get through these friggin' Yankees, okay? Like, trust me, we all need to beat the Yankees in the American League for those fans. And in the National League, you don't want to face those guys in the World Series, right? No, you really don't. So help us. Tell us in the comments their Achilles heels. I have been Dubs Brizzles Warren Sprague. That is the dastardly Dan Harrow. We love baseball. We hope you do too. Let us know how much you love it. And we'll talk to you again next time we cover our bases, baby.